Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here on the Sound Strategy Network in association with the Team Legacy gaming community. I am Bridger. I am bringing you all of the great discussion here about Star Citizen. We've got a great show for you today. Glad you got hold of the program, however you may have found it. Tell a friend or two, won't you? We've got the audio feed if you want to listen to the podcast on the go, or you can watch it on YouTube. You can find all the details at talesofcitizens.com, which you're probably already at because you're watching the video and or listening to it. So, why don't we talk about Star Citizen, guys? We talk about Star Citizen every other Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we record the show. If you'd like to watch live, twitch.tv/Bridger15. You can also find the information and links on this website. So, let's get going and introduce everyone here. For some reason, it went back to the Tales of Citizens thing, and that's how we just have to roll every once in a while, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I am Bridger. Welcome to the show. Let me introduce my co-hosts. To the left here, we have Gray. Welcome, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad. And joining us for the first time so far, we have Tim Young, an astrophysicist from Down Under. Welcome.
G'day.
G'day. Yes, that was your credentials are now authorized. We believe you. So why don't you?
100% Australian.
There you go. So we're really glad to have you on here, Tim, because we've got a lot of interesting topics to discuss today about the physics of Star Citizen. But why don't you briefly tell us, what's your current position as an astrophysicist and what kind of programs do you work with?
So my research revolves mainly around end-stage stellar evolution, which is what happens essentially to stars when they reach the end of their life cycle.
Supernovas?
Most of the stuff. Yeah, supernovas, mostly pulsars and neutron stars, also a little bit of black holes, a little bit of white dwarfs, and also just the whole stellar evolutionary phase as well.
Oh, man. So you have, 6 hours to talk, right? Because I got, 6 hours of questions. I love space.
Well, I only just woke up because it's Australia here. So
he's got 8
I've
hours.
got pretty much the whole day.
We won't keep you that long. All right. So why don't you tell us about your program? You're working with a program called Guerrilla Astronomy?
Yeah, Guerrilla Astronomy is a not-for-profit organization that myself and another astronomer started up a couple of years back. And what it essentially involves is groups of people taking random telescopes out to random places, the streets in the city, sometimes out to just random parks. And we just grab people off the street and show them what's in the night sky. So the planets, the moon. Sometimes we can get the Great Nebula in Orion. Sometimes we can get the Crab Nebula or Tuck 47 or some of the other interesting deep space objects.
Okay, and if somebody wants to find out more information, where do they go?
We have a website up at guerrilla-astronomy.org. It's a little bit slow in updating at the moment because the program is still quite new. But you can also follow me on... Please try. You can follow me on Twitter at dungeonmaster, which is my regular handle, and I'm usually posting stuff beforehand on there.
Wow, an astrophysicist, also a dungeon master. I bow down to you, sir. All right.
Gamer.
So, Gray, we had a big sort of reveal between our last show and this one. You happened to catch the dogfighting preview that took place on 12/20?
Oh, lovely. Yes, I did. Watch the whole thing live.
I got some clips here. It's about 7 minutes long that we can play while we're talking, but that was pretty impressive. I mean, obviously they mentioned a lot of the HUD that they're showing here is a very, very early version that they haven't... They've got a much more recent version of the HUD working, but it's not in this build. But other than that, what did you think?
Well, what's impressive actually about the HUD is that even in their early build, they're already showing more complexity than some of the games like, for example, World of Warplanes that are live and making money. I'm glad to say that they are, or see that they're improving, but I'm also glad to say that they're already looking pretty good. I'm happy that they do seem to have turning down, but it doesn't seem like they've been able to target individual ship components quite yet. It's clear that they're
No.
working on that compartmentalization, particularly for the explosions and having the specific pieces. And they did a really good job of actually demonstrating some of the things, like you can shear a wing off.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. Taking the wing off the ship, take the gun with it, and then you fire one less weapon. The concept.
Yeah, and they showed us how they called it gibbing, like going back to the old Quake days of like turning someone into giblets or giblets or whatever you want to pronounce it, but they called it gibbing
Yes.
when your ship falls apart piece by piece by piece, and how they show the different damage states, and they took us through like blowing up a Hornet one step at a time. That was a really cool moment. And watching those parts just kind of like after a ship is blown up, just kind of just floating there and spinning. It looked already so immersive.
It already feels like a good general dogfighter, and the level of complexity that they haven't even begun to add to it makes me really happy. It's clear that they've already got a product that for any other company would be considered, good enough, let's push it. And they're not even into the early alpha yet.
Yeah, very exciting. The other thing is the new Freelancer looks. I'm so freaking happy about this. It looks great. It looks great. I can't wait to have this view in my hangar. I don't know why I really need it to be in my hangar and why that makes me so happy, like the crab that I got. But this is Star Citizen.
Oh my God, the crab!
That's how we roll. We get very excited about crabs and fish.
That was the first question. That was the first question. They made the little crab hutch at the beginning of December. When does the crab come? Where's the crab?
All right.
How much do they want us to pay them for a crab?
So let's get into this here. Let's talk physics. I've got a lot of really great questions about physics and really cool stuff about science and space and all kinds of cool stuff. But let's try to focus on Star Citizen to begin with. And let's talk about the physics of combat. Based on what we know so far, and we've seen sort of some of the videos here, Gray, would you qualify this as a simulation or realistic, somewhere in between? Where does it lean? What do you think?
I think from what we've seen so far, they're not to the point of it being a sim. They're not to the point of it even being full computer-assisted Newtonian physics, flip around backwards and start shooting at people, although we did see a little bit of that in the demo. The initial demo when they were showing scythes versus Hornets and AI. I think we're going to be a lot closer to a sim for combat when we actually see the finished product or get to the finished product. Particularly when they've been talking about blackout and redout, which there was absolutely none of that in the demo here. I mean, there was nothing you could do in this except for fly around, shoot, and either get blown up or ram into something and die.
Yeah.
There was no, I'm going to flip my ship around backwards and I hope this maneuver doesn't kill my pilot.
Yeah.
I think when we're at that point, we're going to be much closer to a sim, at least so far as the combat is concerned. Outside of that, I don't know. The rest of the game, they've talked about not having to maintain an orbit so much, at least that kind of thing there, not having to worry about launching as much. Re-entry is not going to be a problem that we as players have to solve. I think if we were going for full sim, those were things that we might have to deal with a little bit more, or at least have a computer that was more overtly dealing with them. But, oh, hey, look at that. I don't think we're going to see the full simulation effect on some of that.
Yeah. So, what do you think, Tim? I mean, you study, physics and the movement of things in space in 3 dimensions. What are your thoughts here, having seen, some of these dogfighting videos so far?
I was really impressed. And my housemate, who's also astronomer, we were both looking at some of the early videos for the dogfighting module that really quite blew us away. One of the first things I noticed actually was early on in the piece when they were showing off the turret testing area. They showed off the destruction models of the Hornet, and one of the things I noticed is that when they sheared that wing off early on in the piece, the rest of the Hornet actually kicked off to the right. And that seems really small, but that is Newtonian physics right there. So you've got the whole every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the only way that a rocket works in space isn't because of some magical property of the engine. It's the fact that the engine is expelling masses of gas or energy out the back of the rocket, and so the rocket goes forward in response to it. So when that wing was sheared off to the left, the rest of the ship bucked off to the right because it has to conserve the momentum, essentially.
Yeah, and that's really exciting. I mean, they talked about how every movement that the ship does in space, when you apply, when the ship, you decide to turn around and the flight control computer says, okay, this thruster is going to apply this much thrust in this direction, it doesn't just it doesn't give an instruction in the game engine to rotate the ship. It tells the physics engine this force is being applied to this side at this vector at this amplitude, what happens? And the physics engine then determines the outcome of your maneuver, not a predetermined, oh, you pulled back on the stick so your ship rotates this way, which is really exciting because it means when different maneuvering thrusters get damaged, your ship starts to handle differently because it's damaged, and you're going to have to it's leaning over to the right, and you're going to have to sort of compensate a little bit, even though you're not compensating because of air resistance, you're compensating because your thrusters are malfunctioning, and that's kind of a cool concept.
Absolutely. I think it's going to add a huge amount of flavor to dogfighting, a huge amount of flavor, because there are so many, once you start adding in small systems that can be affected like that, you add up a huge number of permutations to what can possibly happen in that situation. And I think that's going to really make dogfighting something that's not too meat and potatoes. It's going to be really interesting each time you play it.
Some people are asking what's going on at the bottom right of the screen. What you were seeing there was the end of the dogfighting preview where they had that 7-minute bit, and they were showing the people playing the game. And they did mention that the people playing, some of them were playing with joysticks, some of them were playing with mouse and keyboard, and some of them were playing with controllers. And you could actually see some of the differences when they showed the shots of the people playing the dogfighting preview. So that was kind of cool. Definitely good to see that. So here's an interesting question. We're talking about physics and dogfighting, and how do you make sure Star Citizen isn't just a game of who can turn the fastest?
Good question.
Gray, you play a bunch of. Do you play any sort of flight sims or anything like that?
I've played quite a few of them over the years. That is a very good question about who turns the fastest. Really, the answer to that question is making your more combat-heavy ships have things that negate turning advantage. Things like the Hornet turret on a ball. Or the Freelancer having a gun in the back. It's all about opening up other avenues and other ways to fire at people that they don't want to get hit by. Anything to make them stop doing just a standard death spiral and try to turn off in another direction so that missiles become an option again, or the front guns become an option again. No one's going to be able to just sit there and soak hits. So, yeah, if you're fighting 200-300 eyes against each other, you're probably going to have a death spiral until it's over. Same with 2 Auroras or 2 M50s, God forbid. I just don't think that... I don't think there's really any way to prevent that, except for perhaps the whole, what was it, Battlestar Galactica maneuver. You stop your ship, you turn sideways and just start shooting. But that's the hope that they're not going to then shoot you when you stop thrusting forward.
Yeah, I mean, in a flight sim, and I've played my share of them, including, War Thunder, and going back, I used to play a lot. I mean, I played Chuck Yeager, I played Top Gun, and a whole bunch of others back in the day when flight sims were a lot more bigger market, I guess, bigger percentage of the market, maybe is what it might be the best way to put it. And the thing that matters there in those kind of situations is not necessarily who can turn fastest, but you need to know, okay, the other guy has an advantage if we get into a turning roll, so I have to do something different, right? That's the real big difference there. And the same thing if you're just, if you meet somebody and you just go both straight at each other, well, the guy with the heavier armor and the bigger guns, he's going to win that straight-on joust, like where you're both just going straight at each other. So the guy who doesn't have that should do something else. Get behind an asteroid or turn away and try to dodge his fire while you open the distance. Something else has to happen. Different ships are going to be better at different kinds of combat. In World War II based combat, at least in many combat flight sims, which this is supposed to be based around the idea of World War II combat, is there are two different kinds of sort of techniques, and the planes are good at either one or the other in general. There's the boom and zoom, and then there's the like dogfighting, really good at tight turning fight. So the boom and zoom is the one that gets a really high height advantage, dives down on you, does a bunch of damage with heavy cannons or something, and then pulls up and gets out of range of you as fast as possible because they have strong engines and big guns, but they can't turn tightly, so they have to adopt a different method of fighting. So hopefully something of that equivalent will be in basically within Star Citizen itself. So I'm hoping to see something like that. And I think the Freelancer is going to be a boom and zoom. It's got really big guns.
Yes. Oh my God.
I think it has the potential for that, certainly. But that's a big part of these kind of games is that they rely on asymmetric gameplay. And we're already seeing that heavily with Star Citizen. I mean, very few of the ships look like they're going to behave the same as another ship. I mean, even comparing, for example, like the Aurora to the 300 or whatever, they look like they're going to fulfill similar roles, but they don't look like they're going to handle exactly the same. And you only need small differences between ships, small asymmetries, to make a huge, huge amount of difference when you're actually playing the game.
All right, so what else do we got to talk about here? Missiles, torpedoes, rockets, whatever you want to call them, they can... I mean, Gray, you've played PlanetSide. Lock-on missiles, I would argue, are one of the major problems of balance in that game, because if you make them powerful, they're just insta-win buttons if you have them in numbers, and if you make them useless, there's no way to stop planes. So how do you balance like these missiles and torpedoes in Star Citizen?
Limited ammo. That's a big part of it. PlanetSide 2, you were talking about the lock-on concept. The only reason that in numbers that works a lot of the time is you have some engineer who's sitting out there dropping ammo to everybody. I mean, I sat out there for a solid 20 minutes on Isomere, just launching one rocket after another about every 6 seconds.
That's a lot of XP. Let me do the math.
That's not balanced.
Yeah, that's good. That's good leveling right there.
Yeah, you just sit there raking in certification points. In this, you're going to have 6 missiles on your 300i. Now, we're watching one of those on the screen right now. 6 missiles. Maybe, no, it's 4.
It's 4, I think.
4.
Yeah, the 300i is only
That's 4. My bad. It's even less than 6. So if you've got 4 missiles, and somebody else has countermeasures, which you can almost count on somebody having, and you can dodge a missile in this, because you can just get out of the way, or go behind a rock or another ship, or plan on your shields to take the hit, whatever the case may be. You got to make all 4 count. They're going to be strong if they hit, but that's the big if. I don't think that they're going to be as guaranteed, perhaps, as other missile systems have been in other games. They're not just going to be quite as dumbfire.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, when you start talking about things like the, what is that huge thing? The bomber.
The Retaliator?
The Retaliator, there's the word. The whole hard point system, you're going to have a million missiles on that thing if you're loading it out right. If you go head on with one of those things, you'd better be either loaded out with countermeasures or ready to get behind it quick, because that's going to hurt a lot.
Now,
but then again, it should hurt a lot.
Now, in atmospheric flight, missiles are usually going to use fins or some kind of aerodynamic that's not the word. What's the... Some kind of something like that is going to be involved in maneuvering the missile in atmospheric flight. What are we going to have, like mini thrusters on the back of the missiles for them to maneuver? Are they going to have the ability to turn on a dime in that case?
Haven't we already seen evidence of that in a video or two? Mini thrusters on the missiles to some degree, but they were all on the back.
You'd also expect a gimbaling engine on the back. I mean, a gimbaling engine on a small light object is pretty powerful in terms of turning. Wouldn't be able to turn on a dime because, I mean, they're a fast-moving object. And so you're going to expect that if it does try and turn, it's got to cancel all that forward momentum, or at least change it to a different direction.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I'm just hoping that because of that, we're going to have the capacity. I don't know why this is freezing sometimes, guys. Sorry about that. We're going to have the capacity in nimble ships to really just dodge things, either by strafing at exactly the right time or just somehow changing direction very quickly right before it gets to you. It shouldn't necessarily be a 100% thing. I think the heavier missiles should be easier to dodge. If somebody has a really light missile, then that should have a tighter turning radius because it's got less force to cancel because there's less mass on it. So it should be able to turn tighter and faster. And then so, you know, that should be a trade-off. That would be a great way to do it. The heavier missiles, the ones that'll kill you in one hit when you're in one of those smaller fighters, those ones will be dodgeable in those smaller fighters. But of course, the big Idris isn't going to be able to dodge anything. It's going to have to rely entirely on some kind of point defense or a maybe some kind of countermeasures besides that.
And Idris reactive armor shield, which actually is a bunch of auroras strapped to the hull.
I could see that. Oh man. Okay, so here's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know if we really know an answer to this, but let's say you find some enemy in, a pirate shows up when you're trying to scavenge something, and oh god, it's a trap. So you turn to run away. Now, they've mentioned that there's like a top speed within combat. Does that mean if I like punch it and just try at full acceleration as fast as possible, am I just going to run up against a speed wall?
I'm going to bet it takes a long time to hit that speed wall unless you're in an M50.
The speed wall essentially is C.
Well, sure.
As in the speed of light.
C being the speed of light, yes. Right. I'm just wondering within the game mechanics, but I think Gray might be right on that, in that there probably will be a speed wall, but at the accelerations that they have in the game as far as the non-warp speeds, the non, the non, well, I guess warp is the right answer, speeds will be low enough that you could probably accelerate for 3 or 4 minutes and not nearly get fast enough. So then at that point, if you're still near the enemy, then they're probably catching up to you. And if you're not near the enemy, then it'll probably let you out of the instance and you'll be able to warp somewhere, because that's really what you got to do to get away. So, Now, I don't know, how much did you guys play other space sims, be it the X series or anything else in the old days, the glory days of space sims?
Oh, I played all the Wing Commander games and Descent.
Ooh.
Oh, man.
So
all the Descent games were amazing, too. That full, you could go any direction you wanted to in those mine shafts, and you had to, or things would tear you apart and you'd crap your pants.
Yes. So
I swear to God, if they have any of those slasher robots like mining crap in Star Citizen just hidden away in a corner, I'm going to run screaming from that planet and never come back. Not one.
Okay, so what do you think then? I mean, if you compare it to like these other space sims that you've seen, obviously the graphic fidelity has come a long way since days like Descent. But the what we've seen so far, maybe it's unfair to compare.
Yeah, I mean, they're different generations of games. So, I mean, the kind of computational power you need for a good simulation is actually, it's quite high. And when you compare it to a lot of the earlier, the earlier Chris Roberts games, or even some of the early X games, the amount of power you need to sort of to keep track of what's happening on the screen is not insignificant at all. One of the things that you're not going to see in a game, for example, like even Star Citizen, is a lot of people. I noticed a lot of people on the forums were complaining about this. Was the fact that every object isn't being properly modeled against every other object. So I even saw one guy complaining that the gravitational pull between ships wasn't being taken into account.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Listen, when you're flying in
no.
formation, there
no.
is a very small force applied by the Idris to all the other ships. They should have to compensate for that slow drift towards the Idris. You know, it might take a few centuries for that force to pull them to the Idris, but that should be modeled.
Oh, yeah, more than centuries. You're looking at hundreds of thousands of years for that kind of force.
A few millenniums, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I was off by a couple orders of magnitude, and I was making fun of the guy. Well, that's why we that's why we got Tim here.
You don't need to model everything. I mean, it's not necessary. Some things can be approximated. But then the other thing is, I mean, one of my favorite quotes was from a scientist and statistician called George Fox, who sadly passed away last year. But he had the fantastic quote that all models are wrong, but some models are useful.
Ah,
That's
that's
amazing.
clever.
So, essentially, I mean, even gravity, you know, the Newtonian forces that we use in everyday life, they are just approximations. I mean, the universe isn't actually a piece of computer code. It doesn't do if-then statements. It doesn't run and say, you know, if you've got this, then this. If you're falling towards this object, you should be falling this fast, etc. So the important thing to remember is that, I mean, even though gravity is an approximation, you can still use those approximations to land a probe on one of Saturn's moons. Like, that's a pretty damn good approximation.
That is. Or if you forget to convert from feet to meters, you can land it in one of the moons. Oh, that was Mars, though. Wasn't that Mars?
That was Mars. But if you're using feet, you pretty much deserve to lose your spaceship. That's
Well,
it's a
no,
rule of
I can't
engineering.
disagree
it's
with
true.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's our national shame, really. There's nothing I can do about that standard
I
imperial
spent time
system.
in Germany growing up, and the whole feet thing, it's so great.
No, it's even more ridiculous when you look at like rods and yarns or whatever the hell the other things are, and there's like, oh,
Furlongs.
it's ridiculous. Furlongs.
Everything should be done in furlongs.
Oh,
Leagues, because that one book by Jules Verne has popularized the term.
oh no.
All right, so we'd love to talk, and I actually had planned this as the third episode to take place at the end of June or the end of December, because we were hoping to have played the dogfighting module and have a lot more to talk about with regards to the combat system, because we'd be able to really sink our teeth into it. But as we don't have it yet, let's talk about what would. I mean, they're trying to make the most fun game, so they're making a lot of assumptions and changes to what would likely be reality in 900 years from now. How do ships actually fight each other 900 years from now? What do you think? I mean, you guys have read your decent amount of sci-fi, right? What's your favorite pick?
Well, I mean, Chris Roberts kind of had the point. I mean, he hit the nail on the head that all future warfare will be done through drones. Very, very little of it will be done through any human flown ship. But the other thing is that, I mean, if there were a need for spaceship warfare, drones wouldn't even necessarily be. I mean, it would just be people parked in smallish ships, very long distances away from each other, throwing very large particles of lead at each other. It's going to be very, very long-range cannon warfare with enough sort of prediction software to sort of figure out how far ahead you need to lead or how far you need to fire this thing or that thing. It's not going to be sexy or fun or cool. It's just going to be really stale sort of chess-like matches.
Yeah. It definitely would be pretty much all drones or people in capital-style ships, like you said, throwing really long stuff. I mean, the two that I've read recently that come to mind and how they try to realistically model what would happen in the future is the Lost Fleet series and the Honor Harrington series are the ones that I'm reading. And they take two different approaches. The Lost Fleet series tries to take a very realistic version. It's actually written by a retired naval officer who did a lot of studying with scientists of various kinds trying to figure out what future, space warfare would be like. And what it is the ships approach each other at fractions of light speed, and they pass each other in a split second. And in that split second, all the computers are firing all the weapons, and then 3 seconds later, after they've passed, they try to figure out what the hell just happened and who's still alive. That's pretty much it. They just let the computers handle everything. They have to slow down to a certain fraction because the computers can't compensate for all the relativistic stuff that's going on. It can only compensate for relatively up to, I think, 0.3 C was what they used, 30% of the speed of light.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting model. And the other one had...
Honestly, there's a really simple countermeasure to that. If a ship is coming towards you at that kind of speed, I mean, they can't turn, they can't move. All you need to do is inject a small canister of chaff.
Yes, and that was one of the main... They called it grape shot. They in the series.
Right.
Both sides used a lot of that.
Grape shot from cannons.
Yep.
Because they're not going to be able to move out of the way. All you need is paint particles. I mean, particles of paint already in real space orbit are massive problems. They will just, the ablation of it, they just rip away whatever material is comprising your hull. And if you've got, any object traveling at any fractional speed of light, it's going to destroy itself. It's like hitting a brick wall.
In fact, you could just throw a couple of bricks out into space, and that would do the job just as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, bricks are overkill in that situation.
Now, the other series that, in order to make the combat interesting, Honor Harrington series actually utilizes, they say, okay, humans have devised a system of movement they call the impulse system, where they have these wedges of essentially energy on both sides of the ship that are effectively impenetrable to anything. And they are used to essentially push the ship one way or the other and control its speed in the forward and backward directions. And the same systems generate sidewalls to try and protect the side of the ship. But because of the physics of how they go back and forth, at the very end of the wedge where it comes together, there's a gap. So that's a vulnerable point onto the ship. And the sides of the ship, those walls aren't as strong because they're not actively performing force on the ship. So because of the way
explains the little hole in the Death Star.
Exactly. No, he just came up, whoever the writer for that, I can't remember off the top of my head, the writer for that series came up with this system of physics to say, okay, well, ships are indestructible in this specific way, so they use bomb-pumped lasers to power through the sidewalls, and they have to try and maneuver to their top, which is the strong part. It's a really interesting system, but it's not near Star Citizen, unfortunately. Not quite. So the other thing that both of those books agree upon is that orbital defenses, useless, completely predictable. Launch an asteroid from deep, deep space and just get the calculations right, and it dies. It's got no movement. It's just orbiting a planet. It's going to get crushed. So that seems likely.
Yeah. I mean, I know that you've got to have a certain amount of suspension of disbelief when you're looking at something like, for example, spaceships traveling to other planets. But maneuvering a large asteroid is no mean feat. Like, that's really hard.
Oh, come on, mass drivers.
Sure.
But Trilly, do you need an asteroid any larger than a car, like you said, if you're throwing it fast enough?
Well, the trick is throwing it fast enough.
I guess it is.
Ultimately, we're talking about the same amount of energy. If you want to throw a small asteroid fast or a large asteroid slow, I mean, the energy is conserved.
I guess that's true. So what they need is tugboats to push it for a while. Just get it up to speed. All right, so...
Well, sure, but then surely you would see that coming because it's moving slowly and accelerating slowly. I mean, it's an interesting sort of mental idea, but I think asteroid warfare is largely easily countermeasured.
Fair enough. Yeah, just a couple of warheads with nukes on them. You just throw them out there on rockets. All right, so let's talk about physics at the larger scale.
All needs Bruce Willis.
It does. Let's like I said, we wanted to talk more about what we could with the game, but we only saw that 7-minute demo. We didn't really get to play around with it. So while we've got Tim on here, I want to talk about physics at the larger scale, because it's really a fascinating subject, and I figure anybody who likes Star Citizen is going to love this. But first, we have to ask Tim. So what do you think of the black hole system that they just announced for the $36 million? Tell me how likely that is.
Duck and cover.
He's going nuclear.
Oh,
I
you used
think the
nuclear
concept-
even.
Yeah, I was going to let that one slide. I think the concept of a black hole system isn't bad. I think the current implementation is not particularly fantastic. That's okay, I guess. No one on the team is an actual astronomer. But it can be done. You can have a cool black hole system, not the way they're currently doing it. I'm sorry.
So talk to us. What would make it? How would you do it differently?
Okay, so first of all, if you've got an event that would cause a black hole, nothing in that system is going to be left. Nothing at all. Once you've got the kind of supernova event that causes a black hole from a very, very large star, the amount of energy that is released by it's another great quote, and I can't remember who came up with it. I'll have to look him up later. But it was that whenever you're looking at anything to do with supernovas, if you try and think of an analogy, your analogy isn't good enough.
Period.
Period. Doesn't matter what the analogy is. And then someone came up with what about if you had a nuclear bomb the size of a basketball and you put an ant on the surface of the basketball? Would that be appropriate? And you do the maths and it turns out no, it's not appropriate. It's actually bigger than that. So you can't. The amount of energy involved in these supernova events is so vast, is so amazingly huge that you can't really comprehend it. Like, the human brain just doesn't have the faculties that are necessary to sort of put these things in perspective.
So what would they have to do in order to make a black hole system work? So you're saying the star collapses into a black hole, and everything in that used to be in that system is gone, regardless of how far it was out in the system. So could a black hole catch a rogue planet?
Every planet that was orbiting that star is now an X-planet.
What if the planet was made of lead in the middle, so it was really heavy, and then it was surrounded in diamonds?
No, adamantium. While we're there, why don't we go adamantium? So what would be required in order to make a black hole system? Could it catch a rogue planet of some kind?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what you could do with a black hole system, and most, I don't know if I can say most. I'm going to go out on a limb and say most, but I could be wrong. Most black holes exist in binaries. Certainly, I'm sure that most of the black holes that we know about exist in binaries because that's how we find them in the first place. We see a star, and we see it wobbling in a bizarre way, and that essentially tells us that there's something very, very heavy nearby, but we can't see that thing that's very heavy, and therefore it's usually a black hole. Sometimes it's a neutron star, sometimes it's a white dwarf, brown dwarf, other sort of dim object.
Can I ask you to you talk about binary system? That means two stars that are orbiting each other, right?
Yep.
And then you have planets orbiting those two stars, which are orbiting each other. Is that how that works?
Sometimes.
Or
Sometimes.
Well, they don't have to have planets, but a binary system is the two stars themselves. And when you think of a system, you think of planets of some kind, or planetoids.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that statistically, I would say that most stars exist in binaries. The likelihood of stars existing in a binary system are very, very high.
That's really that seems weird to me, because it's wouldn't they? What are the chances that they'd find a stable orbit with each other? Just mind-boggling. Seems astronomically small, so to speak.
It depends on your definition of stable. No system is perfectly stable. The moon is slowly escaping from the Earth.
We've got to stop it!
I know. We're gonna
Somebody shoot a crossbow with a rope and we'll pull.
A few short billion years and we'll lose the moon.
Yeah.
The moon is receding at a rate of, we're talking fractions of a millimeter per year. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But it is slowly escaping. So everything in space really is only metastable. It's not completely stable.
And so, a binary system can have one of the stars collapse and not affect the other star. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, it'll affect it.
Well, not like pull the other star in or blow it away or something like that.
No, so the funny thing is, I mean, one of the ways that you can get a black hole, and in fact, one of the ways you get almost all neutron stars and other sort of end-state sort of situations for main sequence stars, or for large main sequence stars, is that once the star goes into its final phase, usually you'll get something like, for example, a white dwarf, where it's sort of shed its outer layers, it's finished all of its fancy nuclear fusion, and it's just sort of slowly cooling down. The binary system, sometimes they can exist close enough to each other that the heavier star can start sucking in the outer layers of the next to a star, its partner. And this accretion of the nearby binary adds mass to the heavier star, and it keeps adding mass and adding mass and adding mass until the heavier star becomes so heavy that it bypasses the mass limit for what it's capable of being in a stable state of equilibrium. And that's what causes it to go supernova and form the black hole or the neutron star.
Okay.
So the black hole often, not always, but often, is caused by the fact that it existed in a binary system, and that binary was what gave it the extra mass to get it over the limit to form a black hole in the first place.
That is really cool. Now, how close are these two stars in a binary system to each other in, like, astronomical units? For those who don't know, 1 AU is the distance between the sun and the Earth. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how close are they? Are they close like the distance between the sun and the Earth, the distance between Mercury and the sun? What are we talking about?
Off the top of my head, I honestly couldn't say. I would guesstimate that it would be sort of maybe the distance between sort of our sun and Pluto. We're talking big distances.
Okay.
Close, I guess, in terms of stars.
Right.
But maybe I'd ballpark it at about a light year, maybe.
Okay. I win.
Yeah,
I stumped the astrophysicist. I can close the show. I'm just kidding. All right.
A light year is not actually that big. A lot of people sort of think, oh, light years, it's huge. If you're commuting to the city, a light year is pretty big in comparison. But a light year in space is not too far. It's a distance we can sort of cope
we have to go, 18 light years to get to the closest star? Something like that?
No, Proxima Centauri, I think, is 3.5 light years away.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not super, super far away. But for example, Alpha Centauri, the closest star in big quotation marks that we sort of think of closest to our own sun, that is a binary star system. So that's got two stars orbiting around each other. And again, going from memory, I think the distance between them is about the size of our solar system. I think.
Okay. Then, let's bring it back a little bit to Star Citizen here. Now,
right. So if you wanted a habitable black hole system, that binary system is the one I would go for.
Okay.
So let's say that you've got an accretion scenario where the larger star has accreted material from the smaller star. It's stripped off the outer layer of that star and sucked it in, gone supernova, gone black hole. You could have potentially planets still orbiting the binary that haven't been affected, maybe. Again, there's a lot of ifs. A lot of things would have to go very, very right for this to happen. Maybe you could have a ternary system. You do get them as well. You have 3 stars orbiting each other.
Ooh.
They're not uncommon.
Be interesting.
And the third star could be a lot further away than the 2 that created the black hole. And in that case, you could have another sort of small white dwarfish style star with planets orbiting very close to it, and then you'd have this beautiful big skybox nearby of a black hole accreting in the remnants of whatever star was left over.
Oh, that would be cool.
So there are things that you could do that would be very, very interesting.
That sounds kind of amazing.
Well, if that had recently happened, which is possible, what you could do is you could have So let's say that the black hole has just happened, and I say just happened again, big quotation marks.
Just happened in the last, 10 million years or something?
If you thought geological time took a while.
Yeah, astronomical time is massive like that. So if it's just happened, what you could have is the newly formed black hole, the young black hole, very hungry. These things eat and eat and eat and eat. Anything nearby gets sucked into it. And so what you wouldn't see is the black hole, because it's a black hole, you can't see it. What you can see, however, is the accretion disk around the black hole. And that accretion disk, so even the star that fed the larger star to cause the black hole would still exist, because, again, stars are very, very big. But whatever was left of that star would definitely be slowly being sucked into that black hole. You'd have this lovely, big, wispy sort of gravitational fountain being sucked into the black hole. You'd have huge jets coming off the poles of the black hole as it spins. And these jets can extend hundreds of light years, even thousands of light years into space. You'd have massive accretion disk. You'd have beautiful nebula being illuminated by synchrotron radiation. It'd look really, really cool if you were on one of those planets.
Okay, so let's talk about sort of address some of the things that people have been saying that you were talking about. So if I'm sitting in a ship somewhere far away from the sun, let's use our solar system as an example because that's easy for people to relate to. And by easy to people to relate to, what I mean is most people have no idea how massive it is, but let's pretend. So
yeah, sure.
You're sitting somewhere near where Jupiter would orbit the sun. Not next to Jupiter per se, but at that distance, okay? You're quote-unquote stationary relative to the rest of the solar system. You're not orbiting the sun, okay? How much acceleration is the sun pulling on you and accelerating you towards the sun? Since you're not orbiting, you're going to have to be starting to fall towards the sun, right? Because there's no inertial force as you're going around keeping you going. So what kind of acceleration are we talking here?
Okay, so this touches on one of the biggest misconceptions of essentially what an orbit is, because an orbit really is you falling towards the sun. That's what Jupiter's doing.
Right.
It's falling towards the sun. To say that you're stationary with respect to the sun, that you're not orbiting, so let's say a hypothetical situation where you just get dropped into existence.
To clarify, you're falling straight at the sun. That's a better way for me to put it.
Yeah, so, slow.
I'm pulling out the big guns. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sweating. And that's not just because it's 43 degrees in Perth. But
oh, you bastard. It's like 17 Fahrenheit outside. It's like negative a bunch degrees for you.
I would swap with you in a second. This is a little-known fact, but Perth in Western Australia, not only is it the most remote city on the entire planet, but it's also only 13 kilometers away from the surface of the sun.
This is true facts, folks, from an astrophysicist. We have it right here for you. All right, so go ahead.
You walk outside, people are audibly crackling on the street. It's terrible. All the asphalt is liquid. It's a horrible place. Don't ever come to Perth.
I mean, I asked this question. Let me put it into context. Because I asked this question because I imagine myself in Star Citizen. I'm in a ship. I'm orbiting the sun somewhere out in the solar system, right? So that means I'm not falling directly at the sun. I'm falling around the sun, essentially,
you want
in
to
the
get
orbit.
a calculator out? Is what's happening?
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is, so now I get into a dogfight, and I reverse my thrust. I go exactly opposite what my current orbit vector is. So now I'm slowing myself down, meaning I'm essentially going to fall closer to the sun, a lower orbit. How fast is that happening? Is it worth modeling in a game like Star Citizen? Does it even affect anything at all? I just imagine being outside a space station, and I'm trying to leave the space station, but in essence, I'm actually slowing myself down. So instead of going away from the space station in this direction, I'm actually falling towards the place that I was trying to not fall towards, the planet. It's boggling my mind, and I can't figure out how it would work.
It is a little counterintuitive, absolutely, and I fully get that. And even to me, so if people have played Kerbal Space Program, that's the easiest sort of analogy to bring up because it is readily available and people can sort of play with it themselves. But if you play Kerbal Space Program, the first thing you start to realize when you're doing things like docking procedures is that it's not entirely intuitive. When you want to maneuver towards something, you actually have to do some pretty weird stuff up in orbit. But as soon as you get close to the object that you want to sort of dock with, all of that gets thrown out the window because all you're looking at is relative velocities. So back to the Jupiter thing. The force that the Sun is going to exert on you at a distance of Jupiter the force itself is large-ish. I mean, again, it depends how you define large. I mean, gravity is a very weak force. It only works because planets are really big.
Right.
But if you would compare that force compared to the force of you being at the orbit of Mercury, for example, right in close to the Sun, that's going to be way, way higher. But when we say way, way higher, it's still really, really small.
Okay, so it's easy for a ship to just say, yeah, I don't want to fall, and just use some maneuvering thrusters to keep itself from falling, essentially.
Yeah, so you have to be really close to an object to be super, super trapped by it.
Okay.
Sort of. Again, this is sort of. This is not... For every rule, there's an exception kind of thing. And we mostly deal with just a billion different exceptions in astrophysics.
Great. Kerbal is the Kevin Bacon of space games.
All degrees of separation from the current conversation.
All right.
It's not easy to explain, but the short of it.
Listen, if it was easy to explain, they wouldn't say, "What? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this." They'd choose some other word.
Right. Absolutely. The quickest and easiest way to explain it is that once you are dealing in a dogfighting situation, everything else can get thrown out the window. Once you're in an orbit around a planet, for example, if fuel isn't a massive issue for you, and if you can already travel from one planet to another in a star system, if that is trivial for you, getting an escape vector out of a planet is trivial.
Right.
Like, super trivial. So if that is trivial, if you make the assumption that that is trivial, then the concept of modeling orbital dynamics in terms of dogfighting is less than trivial. Like, it's so small, you don't need to bother. And that's it. Another big thing is that people forget just how long things take to happen in space. So one of the complaints that I got on the forums was that, I want to see orbital dynamics, I want to see things orbitally modeled. So if you are dogfighting around a planet, you should see the rotation of the planet. Well, yes and no. If you are far enough away if you're at the moon distance from a planet, which is not too far away, I mean, it's pretty far, but it's not very far. It's the kind of distance you would expect to be doing dogfighting. The moon takes 28 days to orbit around the Earth. And the Earth takes 24 hours to revolve underneath you. If you're
now,
dogfighting...
if you thought Alterac Valley took a while...
Right, exactly. So, if you think that your dogfighting is going to take at most an hour, and that's a long dogfight, like, I would expect most dogfighting instances to take maybe 15 to 20 minutes, as a rough sort of ballpark.
Yeah.
10 to 20 seconds if you don't know how to dodge.
Yeah, or,
Sure.
or maybe much, much less. You're not going to see anything change. The planet is not going to noticeably revolve underneath you in 20 minutes if you're at the distance of the moon. If you're watching it, yes, but if you're watching the planet rotate, you're not doing a very good job dogfighting.
That's true.
If you take an hour-long dogfight, you're certainly not going to see the moon move in an orbit that takes 28 days. And if you're at a distance of, if you're sort of the Jovian planet distances, you're definitely
I love
not
Jovian. Jovian is such a fantastic word. For those of you not
It's a
in
pretty
the
good
know,
word.
Jovian is the name we come up with for planets that are like Jupiter.
Yeah,
It's just like, okay, Jupiter's a really cool planet. Let's just relate everything like it to that.
Well, Jupiter is really big, so it's the best example we have of most of the gas giants that we sort of find out in the real universe.
In the real, we're in the Matrix. Okay.
In meat space universe. Yeah.
True. Now, I think part of the misconception people get is they see these really amazing, like, time-lapse or even real-time footage from the International Space Station, for example, of, like, they're orbiting the Earth, and they see the Earth moving, quote-unquote, so fast beneath them. But that's actually the International Space Station flying around the Earth at what? Like, once every 70-something hours?
90 minutes.
90 minutes. It's way faster than I thought. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Pretty low
okay, so
orbit.
the ISS is a different case altogether because the ISS is practically still in our atmosphere. It only orbits at about 300 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Now, space is technically defined as about 100 kilometers up. That's where the atmosphere kind of is sort of agreed to be so thin it's not exactly considered atmosphere anymore. But the atmosphere isn't just like, it's not like a line. It's not the meniscus of a bubble. You don't just sort of pop your head up and your head's out of the atmosphere and your body's still in the atmosphere. So the International Space Station, if I can digress a little bit,
Sure.
There's a really cool concept with the International Space Station where it gets resupplied by these automatic transfer vehicles, or ATVs, that are sent up by the European Space Agency. These are single-use vehicles. They're not reusable, and the reason they're not reusable is because once they've sent up the vehicle full of food, air, water, etc., and computer parts and whatnot, they then reload it with all their waste product that they don't need to keep anymore, and then fire the ATV into Earth's atmosphere, and it burns up, no harm done.
I don't want their shit falling on my house. What?
Well,
This is
it
news
burns
to
up.
me.
So sometimes if you see a shooting
Where
star,
do you
it
think all
might
that
actually
stuff
just
came
be
under
burning
Julia?
food.
Birds?
But before they do that, the ATV uses its excess fuel to push the International Space Station up its orbit a little bit. So they actually use the ATV as a disposable thruster to sort of increase the altitude, the orbiting altitude.
Because
of the
there's
International
actually
Space
drag on the International Space Station. It's so
Because
low.
there's
There's
drag on
actually dragging on a very thin atmosphere. That is
That's
amazing.
right.
I am going to use that at the next dinner I go to that I need to come up with a conversation to start. Did you know the International
so-
Space Station is actually slowing down? That's
So
so cool.
it does have to get pushed up by a couple of kilometers or tens of kilometers every time they do one of these ATV resupplies.
Okay, so let me...
So the point is that the International Space Station is really close to the Earth. Like, you don't want to be dogfighting that close to the atmosphere because, there's a whole heap of problems that could
Oh
start
yeah,
to...
because when
to
you're
hit you
that
there.
close, even a small amount of reduction in your orbit will sort of cascade due to the drag.
Yeah, and that will actually be somewhat noticeable if you're doing lots of maneuvering and whatnot. The other thing is that, especially if it's an Earth planet that you're working with, I wouldn't want to be dogfighting anywhere near low Earth orbit. I wouldn't want to be dogfighting anywhere near low Earth orbit now, and that is because it is a junkyard up there. And that is just going to get worse as time goes on.
I blame the Russians.
I blame the Americans as
We
well.
put
as the
our
Russians.
junk on the moon, okay? We didn't put it... No, Sputnik went up to orbit. We put our junk on the moon. I think I know my space history.
And
Not
then we've
quite
got the
true.
Chinese, who have their satellites that explode and then take out Russian satellites.
The Americans thought it would be a fantastic idea to launch up a small satellite that then disbanded hundreds of millions of tiny metallic needles into the atmosphere to see if they could bounce radio signals off it.
Oh. Well, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, except now there's hundreds of millions of tiny bits of sharp metal orbiting around the Earth.
So how do we fix that? I know that there have been people working on that problem.
You just send up a fat guy in a spacesuit who's really unlucky, and you see what happens.
Well,
It
that's what I'm
is a
saying. Can we like
genuinely big
create?
problem.
Can we create like a supermassive black hole in a containment unit and use it to attract all the space junk? without blowing up the Earth?
Kind of. And so there are a lot of different projects that are working towards this end. You can try, for example, firing a laser at the space junk. A laser. You can try and force it to burn up in the atmosphere. You can try and scoop it up with nets. There are all sorts of crazy, wacky ideas. Some of them might just work.
I could just see a guy with a giant space butterfly net, just on the ship, just going. It's like a Daffy Duck cartoon. What was Daffy Duck's space?
Sort of ideas that we have at the moment. So, but there is a concept called Kesler Syndrome. Named after the astronomer Kesler.
That's a negative anomaly in endless space. It's a space 4x. Never mind. Go on.
No, okay. No. Kesler Syndrome is a real thing. Kesler Syndrome is the concept of cascade ablation, and that is that if you have space junk up in orbit and you keep sending up space junk in orbit, the likelihood of a collision between the space junk itself gets higher. As the chance gets higher and as the collisions start happening, the space junk breaks up into smaller and more numerous pieces. And as they break up into more numerous pieces, the chance of collision gets higher. And this happens exponentially until you have a cascade effect where the entire orbit gets full of very tiny pieces of almost infinite number of pieces of debris. And we're not too far off a situation where Kesler Syndrome could be a serious issue. And if we don't stop polluting our orbit like we're currently doing, although we have gotten better at it in recent years, projected sort of numbers say that we might not even be able to launch anything into space within sort of 50 years, because anything you launch will get sandblasted by this tiny pieces of debris.
So what you're saying is, if you want to get off the Earth, you better do it soon. Or we need to figure out how to clean up our space junk.
And obviously that would be a really interesting thing. I hope Chris Roberts is listening, because it'd be a really cool thing if you do have to come across, the Earth's space system. Maybe you do have to put your shields up as you come in, because there is just so much crap up there in orbit. And that could be a major differentiator between coming into Earth versus coming into a planet like Terra, which prides itself on being sort of natural and keeping in line with sort of the organic beauty of the system.
It prevents smuggling. You have to have an energy signature to come into the atmosphere.
Yeah. Duck dodger. That's what I was thinking of. All right, so we're running a little over time. We got started a little late. I want to talk one more thing. Because it was a really interesting question that I saw somebody ask on Reddit, I think. So, let's say you're out by Pluto. How much light from the sun actually gets there? Is your ship going to be almost invisible, or in comparison to being like around here? Obviously, we know how bright the sun is here on Earth. How much light actually reaches Pluto?
Good question. Very little. Very, very little. And that's why Pluto is a tiny little ball of ice. And not a planet like all the other ones.
Well, Neptune's a gas giant. He can't compare to that. He's a rock.
I'm the anti-Planet Pluto fan club, so sorry.
Okay. I don't care.
All you Pluto fans.
Uranus is cooler anyway.
You won't see a lot of light out there at all. But flip side of the coin, what little light you do see would sort of be accentuated by the fact that your eyes have to get used to the darkness, I guess. And starlight isn't trivial either. Even on the Earth, if you go somewhere that's really, really remote, and there are very few places on the world that can do this, but if you go somewhere like, for example, the Nullarbor Plain in Australia, where there is just no civilization at all, starlight is bright enough to navigate by. You can see landmarks quite easily. And moonlight is bright enough to read books by. It's actually light pollution from cities that makes night seem quite so dark.
Yep, I've heard that before, and it's hard to believe because I live in the Bosniwash megalopolis, which is one of the few megalopolises in the world. For those of you unfamiliar with the term megalopolis, this is when cities and their suburbs basically merge together, this massive urban area where there's no rural area left. And from Boston to New York to Washington is just, if you can drive 10 miles without hitting a McDonald's, you might be super lucky, because it's just this massive urban stretch. And often, for the conveniences of modern life, it's great, because there's literally a gas station around almost every corner, and there's a McDonald's around every corner. But if you want to do anything like what you're talking about, there's light pollution everywhere. I gotta drive up to like New Hampshire to find some place that isn't so well. No, Western Mass is the same way. They're kind of backwoods over there. But all right, I don't know why I wanted to bring that up. That all having been said,
Western Massachusetts.
I did. They're massholes. That's not my fault. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens.
All of us here in this podcast.
And then I go and break it by fixing it. There we go. Okay. So, there we go. I destroyed my backdrop, and so I had to borrow it from last week's episode, but it's not worked out so well. As some of you may have noticed. Welcome to the end of episode number 3. Next week is episode number 4. It's going to be amazing. We're going to talk about, not next week, 2 weeks from now is going to be episode number 4. We record every other week on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to get Lauren and Calathulu. Calathulu is under the weather today. He couldn't make it. They're going to be back on the show. We're going to talk about the Star Citizen economy. Now, we don't have a lot to talk about because we don't have a lot to go on, but we're going to do a lot of speculation. We're going to do a lot of comparisons to EVE Online. It's going to be a great time. Tales of Black Holes. Not maybe just this show. All right. Thank you very much, Gray. Thank you very, very much, Tim Young from the Guerrilla Astronomer. We're going to have you back on because I understand that you also are very avid in the science fiction story writing scene.
Yeah. Mostly, actually, I do a bit of game design and a bit of work in that area too, so...
Okay, so when we talk about the story, we're going to get you back on, because there is some cool lore written for the game even now.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
It's very cool. Anyway, so have a good night, everybody. I'm Bridger, signing off. TalesOfCitizens.com is where you can find more information, and you can sign up to receive information about the show when we go live. If you subscribe to the Bridger15 Twitch, or the Bridger15 Twitter, or the Sound Strategy Network YouTube channel, you can find out more information about us. And there goes the backdrop, so I'm going to cut it now. All right, bye. See you later, guys.
Have a good night.
This is a nightmare. This is like when I wake up thinking I have a test today. Like, I graduated from college 6 years ago, and I'll wake up and be like, shit, I didn't study. Like, that's what I felt like today when I was like, okay, let's just get the show started. We're already 10 minutes late, and I don't have a background because I deleted it because I'm an idiot. So now I have to go back in Kerbal Space Program and let it sit there for 45 minutes as it goes around Kerbal, and then take that and throw it into Sony Vegas to rotate it 90 degrees and then re-render it for the lengths to which I go to make your guys' experience better. That's all I'm saying.
Isn't sitting at Kerbal Space Program for 45 minutes exactly how you wanted to spend your next weekend day?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now, we can't have a long after show because we've got a Star Citizen chapter meeting for our leadership. We're going to be ironing out some things and getting the Team Legacy Star Citizen chapter really buttoned up and ready to reveal itself to the world and talk more about it in the future shows. So I guess we'll call it here. Thanks very much, Tim, for coming on.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Oh, it was great. I love learning about space science. It's my favorite kind of science.
Okay.
It's my favorite science too.
If I was a core, I'd be the Space Corps from Portal 2.
Yeah.
Space.
Yeah.
Space. Dad, are you space? Yes, son. I am space.
We are a family now.
We are a family now. I need to go back and play that game again. Oh man. All right, we're tuning it off. Thanks guys for watching. We'll catch you next time.